Yeah, Marcia, several months since the summer, this has been something that the government and Algoma Steel have been working on. And really what this is, and you heard it there from Minister Haidu, this is an acknowledgement that Canada needs its own independent steel, that Canada's steel industry is suffering greatly from these 232 tariffs that have been imposed by the United States at 50% now on Canadian steel, and that there is a need to shift in the industry. But what's also interesting here is the acknowledgement that the opportunity for that shift does not yet exist. We heard the jobs minister talking about the vulnerabilities that exist if Canada does not have its own independent steel, the need to ensure, in her words, that Algoma not only survives but thrives. But we also heard in the same press conference from Algoma Steel that the current Canadian market doesn't exist in a way that they can shift their operations from the States. This is a company that was doing 60% of its business south of the border, and while this funding is going to ensure that they can continue to survive, that there won't necessarily be significant layoffs, because that is a condition of this funding, that it goes towards worker retention, and that they can start transitioning their mills and steel mills into targeting more of the Canadian market and creating products specific to the Canadian market. Right now, that doesn't exist. And they were quick to point out that they anticipate this will happen through things like the Major Projects Office and the changes that Mr. Carney has promised. But right now, it isn't there. And so this funding is an acknowledgement on both the federal government parts that the impacts of tariffs have been severe, but also that the projects that are going to support these industries are not there yet. And there is a need for some funding to hold over in the meantime, to tide these companies over in the meantime. And as they pointed out, this is the only independent Canadian steel company in the country. It has massive implications for national security, especially when it comes to things like a defense industrial strategy, which this government has also promised.
All right, so these loans, you kind of touched on it, they're going to be put towards what?
Significantly, worker retention. That's the biggest caveat for these loans. This is part of a special federal body that was announced this spring in direct response to the tariff threat from Donald Trump. It's also going to go towards the transition for Algoma from what are blast and coke oven furnaces, traditional fossil fuel furnaces, into what's known as an electric arc furnace. This is going to be not only a little greener, but it's much more efficient than traditional furnaces. So right now, the challenge that Algoma Steel has is in a coke oven furnace or a blast furnace, it not only requires fossil fuel, but it requires continuous fossil fuel. It's very hard to turn it on and off very quickly, and so they are producing more steel than they need right now, and they called the operation of those furnaces unsustainable. This is going to allow them to speed up the transition to an electric arc furnace, which allows them to have much more control, not only over what they produce, but how quickly they can turn these furnaces on and off, essentially allowing them to slow production. That is a big part of what this funding is going to be going towards, and they said with this funding, they're going to be able to speed up their transition to that furnace, saying that they're looking now at January to mid-2026 as the timeline for getting those furnaces online. So that's specifically how this is going to help Algoma Steel. And with those new furnaces as well, they'll be able to shift their production to, very specific Canadian coils designed for our market rather than products that would have been designed for the States.
Colton, thanks for all of that. Colton Praill joining us from Ottawa.